much of their books as have reached us. I venture only such explanations as will make clear their identity with the conceptions on the same subjects of the wise men of India, Chaldea, Egypt, and Greece. Alright? I do not ask my readers to accept a priori of my own conclusions, but to follow the sound advice contained in the Indian saying quoted at the beginning of this preface. Alright? Verify by experience what you have learned. Then only then form your own opinion. Alright, so we continue. Continent of Mu by Colonel James Churchward, 1931. And I'm on page 113, wanted to read this part to you. More correlation to what we're learning. It says, now I shall try to fix an appropriate date of the Naga colony in India before it became a colonial empire. Alright, so a colony. One prominent figure in the Naga or Maya Empire in India. So this Naga Empire is really the Maya Empire in India. It's a colony of the Mayas. So it says that one prominent figure of this Naga or Maya Empire in India was Prince Maya. Yes, Prince Maya. They had a prince. His name was Maya. The time of Prince Maya is doubtful. Although I have come across many records about him, not a single one even estimates the day when he lived. But according to traditions, and these traditions are as plentiful as leaves on a tree, Prince Maya lived 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. In Ramayana, or in the Ramayana, alright, that's a book, an ancient Hindu book of poems or stories or something like that, alright, we find this reference to him. In olden times, there was a prince of the Nagas, whose name was Maya, of the Serpent Kings, of the Nagas. Who's the Serpent Kings again? The Mayas, right? His name was Maya. Prince Maya was the author of the Surya Siddhanta, the hoariest treatise on astronomy in India. Its age has been variously estimated at from 10,000 to 22,000 years. At the time of Prince Maya, the Nagas were an empire. When the handle and shovel of this knife were made, the Nagas were a colony, antedating the empire. That they were only a colony is clearly shown by the suns without rays on the horizon. This proves the extreme antiquity of the handle and the sheath. Alright? And this is what they're talking about, this knife and handle. The Naga Hindu knife, they call it. It is not known when the Naga Empire ended, but they're saying that this is very old, before their empire was established, when they were just colonists coming from America.
So what is the Ramayana? It says the Ramayana is an ancient Indian epic composed sometime in the 5th century BC about the exile and then return of Rama, prince of Ayodhya. Alright, so we're in ancient history encyclopedia. Alright. It was composed in Sanskrit by the sage Valmiki. Alright, so this was written by this guy named Valmiki, who's known as famous sage. Alright. The Ramayana. Valmiki was a great sage and author of the Ramayana. It says Maharshi Valmiki, the author of the great Indian epic Ramayana, was a Hindu sage who lived around the beginning of the 1st millennium BC. He is referred to as the Adi Kavi, the original creator of the Hindu sloka, a verse form in which most of the great epics such as the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, Puranas, and other works are composed. Alright, he started that. Alright, so just wanted to read this book over here. And we're in the book here. It's called Garden of the Elder Gods by Don Schom. Alright, and just reading right here. There's an overview of such regional centers will commence within Asia, where one of the early academies was evidently located in ancient Burma, modern-day Myanmar. According to the Indian historian Valmiki, alright, here we go, Valmiki, right? An Indian historian who's a real sage, a real historian. Alright, Burma was the first settlement in Asia, with some records supposedly dating its cultural start around 33,000 BC. Alright, they can go that back. Alright, according to them, right? Records from other diverse cultures state that the extensive instruction was dispensed throughout Burma prior to its dispersal into other lands. Such graduates eventually migrated eastward into China and southeastward into Thailand and Cambodia, as well as westward into an uninhabited part of northwest India. Alright, so they're going to tell us what they're talking about when they're talking about these graduates. It says, in those areas, human graduates and a few helpers that accompanied them taught human natives they encountered. those regional teachers became known as the Nagas. Alright, the Nagas. Certain ancient tablets found in Burma have been directly linked with Naga records found within India. Writings by Valmiki expressly stated, now listen to what Valmiki said, the author of the Ramayana. Alright, listen to what he stated. It says, the Maya, starting from the land of their birth in the east, right, in America, they went first to Burma and there taught the natives, who became known as the people of the Nagas. Alright, you see what's going on here? You see the correlation? The original indigenous culture of India is thought to be that of the Danavas, the Nagas, who were later called the Nakals, and still later became known as the Maya. Alright? They later became known as the Maya, reportedly imparted that culture. It was the Nagas who started this whole Indian or Hindustan or Hindu mythology, culture, history. However, Colonel Churchward claimed that the original or earliest people were actually the Maya. Alright? He taught the right thing, which was the Maya. Perhaps a reference to the ancient ones, or the pure-blooded, human-like lunar Petries that comprised the group known as the Helpers. Valmiki further claimed that the Naga came to be called the Maya in certain later settlements. So even these Nagas were called Maya in India. Alright, you hear that? Accounting for the overall confusion of the chronological order of introduction between the Naga, the Navas, Nakals, and Maya. They're probably all the same people. Some records resolve this linguistic dispute by referring to the earliest civilizers as the Naga Maya, the Naga Maya. Alright? There are further indications, although inconclusive, that the Naga Maya may have also been associated with the Mayans of Mesoamerica. Alright, they are the Mayans of Mesoamerica. Where else would they get the word from? Ancient records indicate that the original Naga Maya were associated with the serpent people. The what? Serpent people. Again, we were reading earlier, right, in the book Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids. Right? Origin of the Maya, what did it tell us? Right, the book of Chilambalam related the first inhabitants of Yucatan were the Chanés, people of the serpent. Alright? Itzama, serpent of the east. Alright, the Chumal book of Chilambalam is even more specific. It speaks of the first inhabitants of Yucatan known as the Akanule, or people of the serpent. People of the serpent. Alright, we go back to Garden of the Elder Gods. Alright, the other book we were reading. It says again, ancient records indicate that the original Naga Maya were associated with the serpent people, the snake kings, the Nagas. What up, my Naga? The esoteric non-human race of wondrous beings. Esoteric non-human, so they want to make it all mythical, right? That reportedly possessed immense cosmic wisdom. The serpent symbol was one of the ancient icons, specifically referring to the ancient ones. You see, that's you they're talking about, the ancient ones. Hence, the Naga emblem became the serpent or cobra symbol of ancient India, one revered as signifying both great wisdom and immense knowledge. And you find that in Egypt too, right? Now back to what the Ramayana was telling us and what we were reading in the other book, right? It was saying that about Prince Maya, right? It says one of the prominent Naga Empire leaders was the original Prince Maya. Alright, this is in their Hindu text, Prince Maya, who came from another land, with a later namesake or counterpart also existing during much later times. No written record established a time frame for the original prince, but oral traditions place him as living sometime between 18,000 and 13,000 BC. The Ramayana merely refers to the original Prince Maya as living in the olden times. Original people from the olden times. That original prince is credited as the true source of most of the esoteric knowledge of India. Alright, he was a Maya, he was an American, a Naga. Right? He passed the knowledge over to the Hindus over there, or the native people over there. Alright, passed down over the ages, which was later contained in the Surya Siddhanta. Alright, all that he taught, Prince Maya, was written right there in that book.
Or called Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx. This is written by Augustus Le Plongeon. Perhaps also will be felt the necessity of recovering the libraries of the Maya sages, hidden about the beginning of the Christian era, to save them from destruction at the hands of the devastating hordes that invaded their country in those times, and to learn from their contents the wisdom of those ancient philosophers, of which that preserved in the books of the Brahmins is but the reflection. You hear that? So all these books of the Brahmins in Hindustan is just a reflection of the old knowledge of the Mayas. And to learn from their contents the wisdom of those ancient philosophers, of which that preserved in the books of the Brahmins is but the reflection. Alright, so these books of the Brahmins in Hindustan or India is just a reflection of the Maya history or stories or knowledge. Alright, that wisdom was no doubt brought to India. Again, that wisdom was no doubt brought to India, and from there carried to Babylon and Egypt. So it went from America to India, and his, based on what he's reading, to Babylon and Egypt in very remote ages by those Maya adepts, Nakal, the exalted, who starting from the land of their birth as missionaries of religion and civilization went to Burma, where they became known as the Nagas, demonizing serpents, right? But we're talking about the snake kings, the Khans, the Nagas, the Mayas, the plum serpent, the Khans, priest kings. We're talking about the dragon kings, right? Not all snakes are bad, just like not all angels are good. Thanks to King Drop for that drop. Alright? So again, they went to Burma, the Maya, where they became known as the Nagas, and they established themselves in the Deccan, whence they carried their civilizing work all over the earth. Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids, again by Peter Tompkins.
Alright, so now we're on part 25. It's called Prehistoric Mexico. Alright, and I want to read this part. We read from a book a little bit, Mook, The Lost Continent. That was written by James Churchward. I want to read a little bit of the story behind that book, though. Alright, so it's in this book, Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids. So it says, one indication that a far earlier civilization existed in the Valley of Mexico than was reached by Manuel Gamio's spades comes from the tantalizing discoveries made in the Mexican highlands by a Scotsman, William Niven. As a mining engineer working for a Mexican corporation, Niven described coming upon the remains of two separate prehistoric civilizations at depths from 6 to 30 feet below the present level of the Valley of Mexico. Alright? He found a whole city, town, ruins, 30 feet below the Valley of Mexico. Alright? That's how far he found it. That's how deep. So dig on William Niven, alright? These discoveries made between 1910 and 1930 have hardly been considered by the scientific world, partly because they fit into none of the preconceived notions. Alright? It doesn't fit into their out of Africa or theories and all that stuff, right? Mesopotamia and all that. And partly because they were used by an even more unorthodox author, James Churchward. Alright, so it seems that this author, James Churchward, somehow knew William Niven, got the info, and wrote